Welcome everybody to this is actually episode 60
Oh,
of a big number. It's pretty wild that we have all of these crazy entrepreneurs, founders that have been able to do 60 episodes while
I'll
still
celebrate when we get to 69. That's when the real party starts.
but wanted to welcome Ronik here as our guest, and wanted to just give you a chance to introduce yourself, and also like how we even know each other, and like what your business does, and all of that great stuff.
Let's do it. I'm Ro, co-founder, CEO of Pietra. And before this, I worked at Uber way back in the day. UberPOOL was my claim to fame. So shout out to all the carpooling people. And Kevin, how do we meet? The honest truth is I met because I admire Airhouse. So I reached out and I'm like, man, this guy's building a company that I admire. So I need to talk to him and see how we can work together so I can learn from him. And that's kind of how it started, right? I was like, hey, you're building something cool. Let's chat. Um, and oh my god, the wonderful world of e-commerce and logistics and manufacturing and all that fun stuff. Um, the world is smaller than you think. So we would have bumped into each other, sooner or later.
No, I think actually I was pinged by like 3 or 4 other investors is like, "You need to talk to, uh, Ro, and he's doing some amazing stuff." And then we got connected, and, it's been, great to get to know you and all that stuff, but one of the reasons that I wanted to have you on, the podcast is that you are like myself and Sarah that are completely unfiltered. Like you tell the honest truth about like all of the like the juice that like people
And we're all
like
gonna get
they
canceled. We're not gonna make it to 69 episodes.
We're all getting
we're
canceled.
uh,
Before we get into the gossip,
uh, uh,
I can you explain to me what Pietra does like I'm a, kindergartner because I'm not in the industry and I don't understand all the lingo of shipping and logistics?
Yeah, like explain to me like I'm five, right? That's said, so I can't use like big
5,
words. But
6.
yeah. In the most simplest terms, we build the tools that allow people to run their e-commerce business. So sell products on the internet. And we help with we're like the AWS for e-commerce, and we can help you with manufacturing and sourcing tools, an entire fulfillment and logistics operation we got going, so you can ship your products to your customers. And then we build a bunch of e-commerce software, whether it's storefront or marketing tools, to help you grow your brand. And the idea is it's one platform that you can go to start and scale an e-commerce business and do it from your laptop, from anywhere in the world, at just about any size of business. You can get value from the platform. So that's what we do.
do you guys work with just so for the audience knows, like, do you guys work with like super small brands starting them out, or do you work with like mid-market brands, or like how does that work?
Yeah, it's pretty wild when you build tools. You see different types of people using those tools. And so we have people that are just, they come to Pietra and say, I have an idea for, my own line of sunglasses. So like really at the idea stage, pre their first sale. And then we have multi-$100 million brands that use parts of Pietra as well.
Right.
And it really is this modular platform where depending on what you need as a business, you can cherry pick the services and the software that you can either use or install on your website. And so the idea here is, in the last 20 years or whatever, 15 years it was, um, where Shopify was a thing, uh, the hard part was how do you sell something online? Like if you have a hat, you want to sell it, like how do you do that? Then people bought website builder or people created a website builder like Shopify.
Right.
Now the hard part is not where are you going to sell it? You could sell it on your Shopify website or like Facebook Marketplace or TikTok Shopping or whatever. It's everything else that goes into running a business online that you need help with. And so we
Mhm.
are helping people with that part of the business. So like everything that sits under your website.
Got it. Got it. So I've got a burning question from one of our last calls that I have to ask. So your board is you have Keith Boy on your board. He is a very um on I'd say on Twitter he is very I don't know what you want to call it, contrarian or loud mouth or whatever. But you also mentioned that he's like your best board member. Like, I like explain to me that like dichotomy there. And like it's like the personal persona that is like maybe different than and I'm sure Sarah will also
I
weigh in
love Keith.
as well.
I'm team Keith
Mhm.
Boy. Like he's my one of my favorite people on Twitter. I don't know that I love like Miami as much as he does. But I love that he's like passionate about stuff and
Yeah.
fights
Yeah,
for
yeah,
it.
yeah, yeah, yeah.
But I'm curious like how that dynamic does work on a board because, I think in my experience, I've wanted my board to be a little bit like let me take the lead. And I wonder, someone who is vocal and contrarian, um, how that I think he's probably a really smart guy and directionally correct about a lot of things besides Miami.
Mhm.
The one thing he's wrong about, but everything else he's probably right about. So yeah, I'm
He's
curious how that
definitely
dynamic
he's
works on a board.
very wrong about Miami,
He's
by the
wrong about
way.
Miami, but
I
he's
like
like
Miami. I mean, I don't love
good
uh,
voice for a lot of other stuff, especially
Where are you located right now?
so we have an office at our headquarters, like our gravity center is New York. So we have an office right in Soho. It's pretty small. And then we were a pandemic company essentially. So we do have a small team in Los Angeles. Our whole logistics operation is in North Carolina. So there's a fair
Yeah.
bit of fun
so he's
travel.
probably okay with that because it's not San Francisco, right?
Yeah. Well, I was in the to be fair, I was in San Francisco working at Uber, living in the Mission, walking to work every day. And, coming from Seattle where I worked previously, I would have to take a lot of detours on my 12-minute walk to the office of the Mission based on various factors of what's happening, whether it's people defecating on the street or like,
Oh god, yeah,
crazy
we
person
had an
like
office in the Mission that we had to get rid of because there was too much defecation in front of the office.
that's like people who don't understand San Francisco, like, will say think that's really weird. It's like a real weird thing. Like normal people, like in the morning, you have your cup of coffee, you get outside, you're like, nice deep breath of fresh air. That's not what it's like when you live deep Mission. Uh, it is like, all right, we're going outside now, guys. Like the N95s that were popularized through COVID, we were rocking that stuff way before. No, we weren't. Uh, but
Exactly.
those are like utility accessories. No, but I think I think what he is right about for on that front is like, um, I'm now, and we can get into this. We started in a WeWork very early before the pandemic, and then we went remote, and now we're back in person. And I think there is definitely something to being together that, and I've been trying to quantify this and articulate it with the company in like water cooler discussions. But there is something extremely positive that you get from being in person. And it's almost
Completely
difficult
agree.
to articulate. It's almost like, and the way I think about it is like when you're remote and you're using these tools like Slack, um, it just takes a little bit more effort for everyone to make sure everyone's up to speed and, getting, if you in passing, you say something and you're like, oh, we should get everyone up to speed. We just like kind of made this pseudo decision, especially in a small startup. And then what I noticed is, um, an interesting like negative loop where I would know that if we made a decision, I would have to like spend time trying to figure out how to get everyone up to speed and all the context, and therefore make less of those decisions and therefore have less of those conversations. And it's like
Mm.
the burden of proof was on me on this side of Slack to be like, like, should we have this like this, or should we just like wait a week and then have a big group discussion so like we don't have to like go back and forth on Slack?
Yeah,
And
I
it's
totally
interesting, it was
agree.
like, you don't notice it until after, where you're like, "Okay, um, I was making less decisions and I'm moving less quickly because I was, like, subliminally thinking about the tax associated with, like, educating everyone else." It's like a weird thing that I realized was happening. Um, so anyways, he's right about, I think, about that.
He de he
Yeah.
he 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 definitely is right about it, in my opinion, the in-person piece. Like, am now scaling up, our company, in the Bay Area, and, like, a third of our team is in the Bay, and we get together, at least once a week, and, like, we solve so many problems when we're, like, actually in person, and so I I personally think that he's wrong about Miami because I think that that's not a central hub for talent, um, but, I think he's right with the in-person piece, but also, one of the things I wanted to touch on, because I also got to spend with my last company, with Shyp, we were, I we were either going to raise money from John Doerr, from Kleiner Perkins, or from Mark Andreessen, from, E16Z, and I got to spend a lot of time with Mark, and, like, the behind the scenes, like, I remember very well, like, me and Mark spent, like, 3 hours at his, like, favorite, like, breakfast spot. I can't remember where it was, and but also, like, I would consider him, like, a little bit of a troll on Twitter, and also same with Keith, and so, like, what do you either both you, Sarah, or Ro, what do you guys think about that? Do you think that's, like, an attention grabber, and that they are actually really great people underneath? Um,
Oh, I think, like, in my experience, I mean, there's no question that Keith's, like, a good person underneath. I think, at least from my experience, and I say this and I've said this before, and, hopefully he, um, doesn't remind me of this too much, but I do think that his advice to me is the reason the company is as successful as it is during very critical
wow,
moments of the company where I know I probably would have, as someone who hasn't experienced that, I'm gone down the wrong path. And, like, it's the things that and so, like, I'm very open about that. I remember the first time he sat me down, like, the second time after I met him, and was like, "Why do you have a free platform? People need to pay for the product." And, like, even just, like, little things like that where I was like, "Oh, yeah, it's just, like, gonna be easy, right? We'll just get a bunch of free users and then convert them to paid at some later date when you guys give us more money." And he's like, "That's not how the world works, dude." Like, remember, you're
right,
running a business and people are gonna pay you for the thing that you create. So those are, like, very tactical examples. But then I think the most important part of why I enjoy working with Keith and why he's so valuable to other founders is there are so few investors that are also operators. So when he
Yeah.
gives me advice, you bet your ass I listen. Because guess what? It's not like back 4 years ago when I started this company or worked here, this is a growth hack that we did. It's like I know the fundraising market as relevant as yesterday or whatever, right? Like I know this is happening
right,
now. These types of problems are like 2024 problems. And so much of investor feedback is, or guidance or advice or whatever you want to call it, is like stuff that worked 3 years ago. And I'm
right.
like, you don't really realize that stuff that worked 3 years ago, like generally won't work
Or
now.
worse, like, it's not they've actually never been operators,
Oh,
and
that's
it's
in
stuff that's never worked, and, like, I think that's we have some of those kinds of investors too, and they can be great for a lot of things, like, they have their
yeah,
talents, but when they try to weigh in on, product or operations or how to grow or scale, like, that's where it all kind of falls apart because, like, you just have no idea what this stuff takes
yeah,
or
I
costs.
totally. And like it's funny, but I like to think that working with Keith and Carter's also awesome, who's also on our board. And they have, different personalities, but equally valuable. I think understanding how to work with founders and how to motivate them. Like there's certain,
Yeah.
I played baseball growing up, there's certain coaches that actually did impact the way I think about the world and the way I play baseball or whatever. And there's some coaches that were just ineffective, and the best coaches are the ones that can dial it in. Like he knows what to say to me to get me to act, and maybe that pisses me off, maybe that makes me happy, maybe that nudges me in the right direction. And I think that's such a overlooked skill from an investor is like, how do you get the best out of me? And a lot of the times, I think if founders don't admit this, I don't know what I don't know. Like, and so I'm not walking around thinking I have like a strong opinion about something that I know nothing about. Or if I do have a strong opinion, it could be completely wrong. And you really need someone who understands how to get the best out of you. And my favorite scene, I remember when he was
Right.
switching to another company, he went to KV. I flew down, I was in his office and I was playing the final scene of Whiplash, like on the phone, waiting for him to come in with like, and I was like, this is how I would react to like a coach. It's like it resonates with me. Like when you're trying to bring the best out in that last scene, he's trying to bring the best out of the drummer or whatever. And it's like super intense.
Right.
Um,
Right.
I view that as like a very positive coaching experience, not a negative one. And some people, for whatever reason, they just don't respond to different ways of coaching. So they might think it's like wrong. But for him, working with him has been a godsend for the company. Um, and again, I
Cut out.
can't,
You
sorry?
you cut out there for a second.
Oh, I was gonna say
You cut out
working with
there.
yeah, working with him has been like such a boost for the company. Um, and I think his advice is very, on point and relevant. And I think the relevant piece is what I think other founders should remember. Like when I came from Uber, and the reason it hits so close to home is when I came from Uber, it was very easy for people to give me advice, even my peers, and we did this and it
Right.
worked. We
Right.
put flyers in Miami and we got some drivers, and I'm like, cool. Like I don't know if that's relevant to us or if that even works anymore, but like I had one investor say I should take it a full page ad in the newspaper. So like think how like relevant these things, some of these pieces of advice are, right? And how irrelevant they are. And I'm like, all right, thank you
Yeah.
for your time. I can't believe I'm paying you, but okay. Uh,
I've done full like subway ads in New York that didn't work at all.
I think my friend has one of the best quotes that like we were like, over a couple of whiskeys we were talking. He's like, the thing about advice that you like read on tech Twitter or Quora, like wherever these first time founders, second time founders go, like it kind of
They come to
feels
us.
like,
They come to us. They come to
yeah,
us
yeah.
now.
Well,
Yeah.
it's like if you read what's on the forums or Twitter, it's kind of like all the advice cancels itself out. And
Yeah.
like, so 50% of the blog posts that say that focus is the number one thing that you should do. And then the other 50% of blogs say that you have to maximize your surface area for luck by spreading your bets and picking the winner. It's like, okay, so now both of those cancel each other out. Which one? And like every piece of advice has that. Don't
Right.
raise from a big firm. The number one indicator of success is raising from a big firm. Small boards, big boards, starting with a freemium product, pay right away. Everything cancels itself out if you really zoom out. And so what do you end up with? Everyone's on their own trajectory. Everyone has their own problems. There's similarities of companies and differences, but ultimately you're going to have the problems. The problems are universal. The solutions are unique, and like, don't rely on Quora blog posts to like help you do the exact problem that you have. It's going to be too general and too high level. And I need to know what to do now, not what worked at Uber in 2014.
Rely on this podcast
Yeah. This
and
Yeah,
the
is in
guests
our intro calls.
and the
yeah,
guest.
exactly.
Yeah. Yeah. Go to Sarah for intro calls. She
I'm
is
Kevin.
the intro specialist. No, my my per hour rate is a lot higher than yours, Sarah. So unfortunately,
It's true.
I don't get as many bookings as you do.
You
You
guys are
grow.
always smart to me. I would never give advice. Are you kidding me? Then I'd be like, I have nothing to tell you. You should go wander. This is going to be hard. I remember one of the hardest weeks in the company's history. I walked into Keith's office and was like obviously so disheveled and sad. And he's like, I think his only response was, well, it's going to get harder than this. And I was like, oh, okay. I'll just leave now then. Yes. Like, this is not the hard part. I was like, oh, it feels like I'm gonna die right now, but okay, I got it. Uh, I'll keep
How
going forward.
is your company doing? Like, what stage are you at? However you measure that in terms of fundraising or in terms of profitability or however you think about where you want to go.
Yeah, good question. I think we're growing pretty well. I think it took a couple of years to really get this company off the ground, and And, now we're growing and the team is growing and we're going global.
Yep.
We closed an awesome round with M13 last year, like late last year, and we have, many years of runway. Growing our
Nice.
revenue, all of our business units are growing, at a pretty healthy clip. And I think, like, the hardest part for this startup was everyone would always tell us, things worth building are gonna take some time and they're hard. And I think, I was pumped with so much, VC Kool-Aid, which is it kind of messes with you a little bit because you're like, should we be building something that's like super fast and like, shines bright hot? And then like, you're like
Right.
playing the fundraising game. Or do we really want to make sure that we're building a $10 billion company so they can go public, so they can grow in the public markets? And that was a really difficult thing for, I think, our small team at the time to realize, which is, we are a company that is taking on three massive industries at the same time. So people are like right away when people meet us, they go like, "You guys are crazy." And then you layer in like the VCs thinking we're crazy, which is like, who the hell is going to fund this crazy thing? Um, and you're like, yeah, like I guess it is kind of crazy. Like we're building an Alibaba and like an Amazon, and like taking on the entire app ecosystem for e-commerce. And we're doing it all together. And there's like six people in it. We work. And you're like, this is going to be like very difficult. So I like to say like it felt like building a bridge where we knew we wanted to put tolls on the bridge, but you can't put cars over the bridge unless you build the actual bridge. So you'll never make the toll
Right.
revenue if you don't
Oh,
finish the bridge.
we can't have any bridge references right now. I don't know if you saw what happened in
Oh, I did it.
Baltimore.
Yeah, that's something
Oh
Oh,
my.
the greater bridge. I'm
that's
sorry to the greater
outside of
bridge
this
community.
podcast.
Oh
I
no, the bridge, like a ship hit it and the bridge completely collapsed. Like it is the most terrifying video I've ever watched. Just happened. Like I always wake up in the middle of the night and it was like 1 a.m. or something Pacific,
oh my
and
god.
I thought it is like the ship basically like tapped it and the whole thing just crumbles down. Anyway, you can never drive
It's
on a
got a
bridge
better
again.
analogy, which is like you gotta build a rocket to get into space before you can put Starlink up,
Yeah, the
right?
better.
I get it. I'm gonna pay for Starlink at some point. I totally get that. But you gotta build the rocket to get in to put the stuff in space. So that's gonna take some time and take some capital. And I think it took a lot like a few years of really, really hard work with a small team. And like kudos to the team staying together, almost no attrition, which is kind of nuts. To be like, everyone's building avatar companies and we went through the creator economy and the TikTok boom and like Clubhouse. And you could see as a startup, like the six or eight of us in a room are like, oh my God, like this feels like we're building something that, yeah, we're saying can last 20, 50, 100 years. Cool. Um,
Right.
and, the Bits and Atoms company, it's very difficult, but, you know, being disciplined enough to get to a point where we can now start doubling, tripling, our revenues every year, that took some time. And now we're reaping the rewards of like, we have this amazing pyramid of our like the base of the pyramid is built. And now we're monetizing like really, really quickly, faster than ever before on top of it. But man, Kevin, we were joking around about this, which is like, I don't know I don't know how this type of company could exist now, like given the current environment, right?
Right.
Like it's taking on three industries at once, bundling it together like no one else has ever done. And it's very, very difficult to do. But then the flip side now that we see it working is you realize you have like a very, very strong structural advantage over other people that compete. Because we
Yeah,
haven't really had any major competitors, direct competitors in years, and the few that we had has shut down in under like a year and a half.
yeah, I think that's actually a really great, learning to share with, all of our listeners, like, everybody that has been listening to this podcast, like I've been in the hype cycle before. Like we were the Uber for shipping for my last company. And now it's all AI and before it
Mhm.
was all crypto. And like that's not where like the real um companies get built. It's like over like you have some sort of like insight into this um, other industry that other people are not working on. I think actually, in Keith, your boy has a pinned tweet. It's like you look at
Highly fragmented,
uh,
low NPS industries.
yes,
Vertically
ex-
integrated, simplify the value prop. I know that tweet. That's the reason that I'm working with them. And it's so true.
exactly.
It's so true.
It's so true. So it's like you can't be following the crowd, and you need to have a unique perspective on something, and you need to be building something very unique. Otherwise, like, you're either gonna get drowned out by competition, um, or you're not gonna have a differentiated product or something like that, and that's also, like, why I'm building Airhouse. Like,
Mhm.
it's in a very, uh like, we're obviously in a very crowded space, but we're taking a very unique look at this, and I'd say the same thing with Sarah, uh, building Winnie as far as, like, um, uh, the industry that she's in, and,
Definitely highly fragmented and low NPS. I got those parts
What is Winnie?
down.
Tell me a little about Winnie.
It is a childcare marketplace, so we help parents find
Ooh.
daycare and preschool, and our customers are the daycares and preschools who use Winnie to, reach parents to get parent interested in their
Very
programs
cool.
and fill their open spaces. So very large, underestimated market. Uh, 60 billion in the US alone just spent on daycare, preschool, and that's not even the
Wow.
other forms of childcare. Um, and no one's happy with
Wow.
with the childcare market. Providers are struggling, so definitely low NPS with these businesses.
Wow.
But not
That's,
sure the vertically integrated part. I have to think about that.
it's your backyard. You guys
yeah.
vertically integrated. No, I think this is a really fun kind of like tangent, but I'll definitely check out Winnie and share it with the company. Um, is during the pandemic, one of our co-founders had his firstborn son, like his first child. Um, and you want to talk about like true startup family. Um, the company chose the name of his child. And so like he's like, okay, well, I guess like,
What?
there's lots of the work. Yeah, this is like the wildest story. Um, like my business partner for life, Pan essentially. He comes into the office where no we work. There's five of us sitting at like one small desk, and he's like, all right, guys, my wife's pregnant. And someone here is gonna name my firstborn son. Like,
Uh,
whoa, you got your wife to sign off on that? That seems very wild. And so we did a process of everyone submitting their names through a Google form, like kind of like as a joke. And then they actually picked one. They fell in love with one. And now little Remy is his name. And we're watching him every day throughout his life, essentially, because it's
Oh,
like
that's
send a
cute.
picture and put in the Slack, but like, that tradition kind of comes on or keeps going. And Sarah, like once they get into school age, I did not realize just like a I have a newfound, empathy or actually sympathy for parents, just like in general trying to work. And then like, I didn't know like how your life changes with preschool, with just schooling in general. I didn't realize that you're always sick or the kid is always sick. And I'm like, what is going on? This is like,
well,
like this
well.
the
I
whole
think
thing.
I think daycare and preschool actually gets a bad rap for kids getting sick. Like the truth is that like kids are building their immune system. Their immune
Oh
systems are
yeah.
not developed. And
Mm.
so yes, of course when they're young they get sick a lot more frequently. And of course when they're exposed to other kids and germs, those germs are going to travel. But
What?
that would actually happen kind of regardless of their situation, kind of the first time they're exposed to a lot of those germs. So sure, keep them in a bubble for the first 5 years of their life, but when they enter kindergarten, that's all gonna happen then when they have to
Oh yeah.
develop their
Oh,
system.
I'm an
We
Yeah,
anti
actually did that experiment over COVID, and we saw it happen.
right.
So I think, I feel for families, and I feel this day to day, when your kid gets sent home sick from childcare, it's never fun, and you're out of childcare for the day, that sucks too. But it's also like it's a developmental thing, and every year in childcare, it gets better. Your kids get more robust, and like my kids who've been exposed to childcare from day one, basically, they don't get sick very often in elementary school, which is a good thing because you don't want to
Mhm.
miss that. That's you're actually
Right,
learning
right, right. Oh, I'm an
important stuff.
yeah, talk about controversial. I'm like a I'm an anti-bubble person. I'm like, I
Yeah.
think like, yeah, they should be eating dirt when like
Me too.
build that immunity,
Yeah,
baby. Like, let's go.
same.
It's yeah, I mean, I think we definitely did the experiment and we saw what happens when you do no germs at all. So you need some exposure. Definitely, I understand parents don't want like hand, foot, and mouth disease or like those horrible things. I,
Yep.
I think there's a
We saw
balance,
that. By the way,
and a lot
also
of
saw that over Zoom.
daycares have to, yeah.
No, go ahead.
So
Sorry,
But
sorry, sorry.
yeah,
I want to change topics
you don't want to
because
talk about hand, foot, and mouth disease, Kevin?
Yeah.
well, I don't think that our
Come on.
our listeners, well, maybe some of them want to hear about this, but my next question for you, Ro, is like you were involved in the upswing of Uber. I'm not sure. I know on your LinkedIn you said that you were responsible for UberPOOL, which was obviously a massive success. I want to. I think myself. I'm very curious, and also I think our listeners are like, what was it like to like build that product and scale that product? And also any interactions you had with Travis, who's obviously he now has a he's got a show about him and all of that. I think any commentary around that would be awesome.
Yeah. I mean, the first thing I should say is like, the UberPOOL team was pretty amazing. Um, so all the credit kind of goes to all of us. It was, in my life, the most like concentrated amount of knowledge that I've like ever like been around. But oh my God, like 2015 UberPOOL. Um, when I joined the company, it was like I like to say like peak San Francisco and peak Uber. Um,
Yes.
what and over that time period, I grew closer to Travis. Like now we're friends. Um, and I even worked at Cloud Kitchens after Uber for a little bit.
Oh,
That
wow.
was fun. Yeah. Um, and I think now looking back,
Also,
um,
quick question: get Travis on this podcast, by the way.
yeah, okay. I will. I think you're gonna have a hard time getting him to come out and do a podcast, but we'll try. I'll hit him up after this and see if he's up for it. I think he'll have some pretty amazing stories that people will fall off their chair.
Yes.
Um, I can only imagine. Um, and I think coming back to your question, I like in those early days of UberPOOL, I think, I had just come from Microsoft, the world's slowest company. Maybe Boeing, like the world's slowest company, and then like is like second slowest. Um,
I worked there.
at Microsoft or at Boeing?
Boeing.
Oh, so
Okay.
you're responsible for all these planes that are broken.
No,
You
no, I did all the iPad development for them.
Yeah.
oh, very cool,
Okay.
very cool.
Yeah.
Um, but the funny part about kind of that transition, and I've talked about this to other people that work at these big tech companies is, um, we were really thrown into the fire at Uber, and there were so many smart people working on something that was obviously going to be big, or was being big in front of our eyes. And I think there's pros and cons to that. It was a very crazy, chaotic environment. I think I was lucky in getting, kind of like that last great rideshare product that was near and dear to the core team's heart, Travis's heart. He did a TED talk on it. Um, and I think one of the things that I will always be in debt to him on is like really learning how to build a business from the ground up and think about the business in a way that you would just never get exposure to at like a big company.
Right.
Um, and anyone that knows him or has ever seen him talk knows that that man does not bullshit. So, um,
No, he does not.
I remember the so I got a couple lucky breaks. I'll be very honest with you. The first lucky break that I got is after a week of working at Uber, someone was like, "You're gonna run the TK meetings every week." And I was like, "What is a TK meeting?" Like, first of all, his name's Travis Kalanick, and the meeting that he runs every week is like the Uber Pool weekly business reviews. And so you basically have to be like, this is the entire business, all the metrics, how much money we made, how much money we lost, what's happening. And I was like, okay, cool. Um, and then so I was like, they're like, you probably should like train for like 4 weeks and be in some of these, and then eventually you should take this over. And I'm like, I'll just take it over next week. Like, like a 23-year-old, 24-year-old, like, I'll just easily do this. And they're like, I remember my boss at the time, he was like, all right. And then I realized like, it's so funny. There was no what I call work theater at Uber. So like I would go to a meeting and even if I was like 80% prepared, I remember being like, and so this happened. And he's like, why is Paris down? And I'm like, oh, this like thing happened and we like had to change surge in this way. And he stood up and he's like, what the fuck did you say? You changed surge? And I was like, do we change surge? I think that was just like a talking point on my slide. And he's like, shut the fuck up. Like, and I was like, oh shit, I got to take this stuff really seriously. Like, this is like meaningful to the business.
Right.
And so, I had so many of those times where like, have you ever felt dread of like, you're at a new company and the guy who was just on Colbert last night is like, obviously this like figure at this company. And he's like, what the fuck did you just say? Like, never say that again. And I was like, yeah, you're right. I should probably like cross my T's and dot my I's before I say anything and like, that could have sweeping implications, like millions of dollars every minute type of implications if I say something wrong.
Right. Right.
So I learned through that process of like, I was thrown in the fire. Probably took me some years to, get over it, but I love every second of it because I knew at that time that like I was chosen to do something that was growing and was going to be amazing. And I would say the prevailing feeling that I had when working at Uber was when I was young, I knew that I could thrive in this type of environment. I would watch these TV shows. I would kind of look up to
Yeah.
these tech moguls, whatever. Um, and when you're sitting at a big company, you're kind of sitting there being like, man, this thing sucks. It's so boring. I want to like tear it up and like do everything. Then there's a different type of like rush that you get when someone's like, yeah, by the way, this whole thing you now own. And you kind of get to this point of like, oh, this is like a lot bigger than I thought even I would give myself. And I definitely can't screw this up. And then you start yourself
Right.
succeeding and the team succeeding. And you're like, whoa, this is like kind of the thing I talked shit about for a long time. And now I'm kind of doing it. So this is like kind of cool. I guess I can do it, because at Microsoft, you're sitting there being like, I could definitely do that. And you never really know. And then at Uber, it was thrown into the fire. It was like, don't lose money, scale into China, scale it up, launch new cities. And I'm like, 25 years old. You know, like, what is going on? I have some hilarious stories where I'm the first licensed, like Uber driver that worked at Uber in New York City. And that was one of the
Wow.
most like iconic meetings I think that I was a part of and like the team was a part of. It was like 8:30 PM on a Tuesday. And this gives you an idea of like how fun it was at the time. It was like 8:30 on a Tuesday. We're doing a business review for Uber, and I was talking about driver side improvements. I was like, yeah, they're like, there's a huge gap. We call it pickup location error. Huge gap between pickup and like where the Ubers are. Um, and I was like, oh, we got to like do all these things. And he's like, what do you know about driving in New York City? Like, do you know if this is a good distance or a bad distance? And I was like, well, we like talked to some people. He's like, no, no, no. You like didn't listen to what I said. What do you know about driving in New York City? And I was like, oh, this is going to be like one of those times. So I was like, yeah, like I'm a Canadian. I don't even have a US license.
I didn't know that. I'm Canadian as
Yeah.
well. I didn't actually know that about you.
No, it
Wait,
gets crazy.
you guys both have like a heavy Canadian accent. I can tell
Oh,
that.
really? Oh, but no, guys, I get it's and then it starts like amping up. So it's like 8:45, 9:15, and everyone's like, yeah, what does Ro know about these things? And then he's like, you know, I think you got to go to New York right now and like actually figure this out for the company, like build it properly. And I was like, right now? I'm like, oh no, no, but like I can't get an American license. I'm a Canadian. And also like New York's a licensed chauffeur market. I have to become a taxi driver and take an exam. And he's like, I see. And he's like, cool. And I was like, oh, I meant to say like I'm Canadian and I don't have a license and I would have to become a taxi driver and it would like take 3 weeks to like write this test where I have to like memorize the map of New York City and like write it by hand. And also the week of training and stuff. And he's like, correct. And I remember being like, so like go now? And he's like right now. And like everyone on my team is like kind of like, what's going on? Got on the next plane, went enrolled in taxi school, literally did the written test of like memorizing the fastest way to get from like the Javits Center to like some place in like Soho. I'm like living in San Francisco at the time.
That's awesome.
Go do a driving test, get my American license, then go write the taxi exams, get that,
Wow.
go rent a car, go on Uber, and then I started driving in New York, and I come back. It was so funny. I come back and I'm like, yeah, driving in New York City as an Uber driver is extremely fucked up. All the stuff that I'm doing is wrong, and it's all just like spreadsheet math. And I remember, and then everyone at the company was like, "Yeah, we should probably go do this." And then we went and go did it. But it's a good example of like what I learned through that experience. It's like you could sit in an office and pretend to like use logic to solve some of these problems. But at Uber, it was like, get your hands dirty, go there, do the thing, and you're gonna really solve the root issue. And at the time, that was like a crazy scenario of like, I was like, what is my life? I would like sit in LaGuardia Community College for a week with no phones, memorizing the map of New York City. I was like questioning everything in my life at that point. Um,
Yeah.
who wouldn't? And I'm like, this is like 15-minute lunch break. And I'm like, oh my God. And the guy's like,
I
the
think
guy beside, I just came from, Mumbai. Like, what about you? I'm like, I'm a student. I go to, yeah, Washington State. And they're like, cool. Why are you driving? And I was like, oh, I'm trying to make some money. They're like, all right. I'm like, gonna cause like 30 other people. But then you actually go solve the real problem. So that's ultimately what he helped me understand. Like startups are way less clean. I guess they're way messier.
Yes.
They're way
Please.
harder than you think.
Yes.
No matter what
Yes.
you think you probably don't know a lot of it. Like you gotta do the hardest, messiest, and most annoying thing to truly find out how to fix it. And then you'll fix it for the world. And then after that, what I learned is, and then people will also not understand how much harder and how much messier it was. It's like, oh yeah, like now that you have the solution in retrospect, that's like fairly easy. And they're like, yeah, but you don't really
Right.
understand how I got here. And I never would have got here if we were just like sitting in a conference room in San Francisco, you know, like going to Blue Bottle Coffee and talking about carpooling. Like we never would have got the solution.
Well, I think that's like the same thing for me with my last company and also with Airhouse as well. It's like you really need to like get your hands dirty and like really like learn. So like with myself, it was like selling the first 50 customers myself, figuring out go to market motion, figuring out like how to actually onboard different 3PLs. Um, and even though that I had experience like running 3PLs before, it's like startups are fucking messy. They are
yeah,
so messy. Everybody that thinks that they're gonna join, like if you want to join Facebook or like a larger company like Microsoft or something like that, yeah, you're gonna have a pretty easy job. But like as like you joining a startup, like I think that um you're for one, you're gonna learn a lot more in a lot shorter of amount of time. But also it's gonna be fucking messy and it's
Oh
gonna be
yeah.
very uncomfortable. And that's what
Oh,
a lot of people do not
yeah.
understand.
Your story really resonated. I joined Google out of college, so similar big company. Good experience to learn what all the different roles do, but like you had to fight for your job. There were like
Or
50 people doing the same job. And then I went to Twitter when it was, still a startup in 2010 and like it was a mess. It was
yeah.
growing really
Chaos,
fast
it's just
and
chaos,
like
right?
chaos and they would just throw things at me and I was like, I don't think you should trust me like I'm not the person for this. And the same thing with like, I remember one day like Jack Dorsey was like, we're going to go acquire this company in New York, get on a plane and go make sure they're good to acquire. And I was like, "You mean like now?" He's like,
Yeah,
"Yeah."
it's like, look, define good. Good.
I
Like
was
make
like,
sure.
"I don't know anything about acquiring companies, but like I flew to New York that day or that next morning, like it was like the next flight I could get on." I also feel like there's something to be said for, having that kind of experience when you're young and like when you can study 3 weeks for a license or get on I would spend a week in New York, a week in San Francisco, back and forth for a year,
Right.
and it was exhausting, but I could do it. Like I didn't have a family, I didn't have
Right, I love
responsibilities.
it.
And, of course, I love parents and I think they're amazing employees and really productive, but I really
They are.
encourage people when they are young and have less responsibility. It's great to get that kind of experience where you're really thrown into the deep end. You can always do that stable office job later. But
Right.
if you can find a fast growing startup or one where you can wear multiple hats and then you can really like dive in,
You learn so much.
you can't pay for that kind of education.
Oh my god, you definitely can't. You start realizing as well, I don't know if you guys feel this, but, like, there's also this, like, thing that some people are born with that I recognize almost right away where I'm like, "You're gonna thrive in our company." Like, you just have that thing that allows you to operate the way we need you to operate, which is, like, it's almost like the same reason why you won't be successful at a big company. Like, at a big company, you have to placate a lot of people, so you don't really have polarizing leaders. You can't, like,
Yeah,
rise to the top at a corporation being a polarizing leader. You have to be, like, this
Right.
universally well-loved, like, always right, working on doing stuff the polarized like, Travis or even me or, like, someone like us, like, we wouldn't thrive at a Google. You think they'll promote people like me? They'll be like, "This guy's crazy." I'm like, "Let's invent this and that." I'm like, and so when you're young and you have that, like, skill set, and I see it in people, it's the same thing that I say to them, which is, like, maybe you shouldn't even work here. Like, if you have the entrepreneurial spirit, like, I don't wanna clip your wings. I think, like, there's so few of us in the world that have the ability to, like, thrive and have fun in this environment and then build something great for the
yeah,
world. I'm almost like, you should go do that because there's so
yeah,
few of us in the world, right?
right.
Um, and so yes, they're effective here, but I'm like, if you have an idea, I think, like, you should go do that. And it's
Yeah, though
interesting,
I
like
will say, like, working in a company gave me, made me realize I could do
mm,
it. Like, it
yep,
is a more controlled environment,
yeah,
even
that's
when it's chaotic. And then to see other people, like, trust me to do things I didn't even think I could do, then I kinda gained a
yeah.
lot of confidence, and I was like, "Okay, I could do anything."
Yeah, or you realize the funny part is like, you realize that, the decisions that the world, like, writes about in a news article, for example, it's just like a logical extreme, um, really did come from, like, an idea that took 20 minutes to, like, crystallize, and then you just decided to go with it. Like, so
Yes,
few founders
yes,
understand when I say
yes,
method, I mean, like,
yes.
"Well, so what's the pricing strategy of the company?" And I was like, "Well,
Uh,
it started with me being like, 'Is $20 a lot?'" Like, "I don't know." They're like, "No, no, no, like, you guys did, like, pricing exercise." I'm like, "Pricing exercise? Dude, this was, like, something we forgot about." And then at 11 PM, they're like, "What's the price?" And I'm like, 20? They're like, 19. 19.99? Yeah, 19.99, let's go with that. And I'm like, "Oh, shit," like, the decisions that you make and, like, how you make it at a small startup, these decisions won't kill the company ultimately. It's just, like, so funny to me to even talk to my friends who are still at big companies being like, "There's no way you guys decided to pivot the company because of that." I'm like, "Oh, yeah, yeah, yeah. We, like, woke up at, like, at 10 AM one day, we were all just fed up, and we're like, 'Fuck it. This shit ain't working. It's day
Ver
70.
versus
It's done,
like
guys. Tomorrow morning, a new thing.'" And I'm like, "No, no,
versus
no."
like a big company that gets McKinsey involved and they have like it's like a 3-month drawn out
Right,
process
right.
as far as
They're
like
like, "Did you
all that
document
stuff.
it?" I was like,
Yeah.
"No, we didn't
Yeah.
document it. We just changed tomorrow, or yesterday." Really, really funny, but to add to that point, I think, I really do see people it's kinda sad in that, when you do stay at a big company for too long, there's a couple of things that I noticed. One of them is that these big companies are really good at running, like, disinformation campaigns to make people think that they're, like, in a
Totally.
startup environment inside of a big company, and it's actually, like, really risky, and it's not, and so they
Yeah.
come to startups, and I like say, like, it really is that Mike Tyson quote, which is like, "You think you have a plan until you get punched in the face." And so I've
Right.
seen what
I like
real
that
shell
quote.
shock looks like. And it's like, I see it in their eyes and I'm like, "Uh-oh, you have never dealt with this type of problem at this intensity, this quickly." And the scary part about it is I don't even register this as a problem. And so, like, and you see them, they're
Right.
like, "Oh, like, it's like indecision." And I'm like, "Oh, yeah, yeah, because like, all of our jobs are on the line now if we get this one wrong." It's not like I might get in trouble or something. I'm like, "Yeah, yeah, that's like that's the gravity of this decision." Now, there's a lot of decisions that we make every week, so don't worry, this won't be the only one that you make. But yes, we are really all hoping we get this one right. And I've
Right.
seen many, many people coming from big companies, um, get that first hurdle and they're not able to overcome it. And they're too stressed, they have to take days off. It's like it really spirals. I'm like, oh, they really kind of made you like they convinced you that you were
Yeah.
taking this at this
My
like
my husband spent 12 years at Google, I think it was,
mm,
and, then he took some time off to be a stay-at-home dad, and then I convinced him to come work for Winnie. But
mhm.
there was, like I mean, he'll say it himself, like, there was definitely a learning curve. He was like, "What? You just, like, do this stuff?"
Yeah,
Just, like, all
exactly. Like
and, but
it's
now, I think 2 years in, he's, like, unlearned all the Google ways, but, like, it was, like and it was, he's a product manager, so he would bring that, like, Google style and, like,
Mm.
engineers were like, "What the F is going on?"
oh
You have
my
to
Right.
god, I think
unlearn a lot of that because it's like, that does not work here. We just
yeah.
we just do it.
It's funny, like, I think, I am as also someone who was a PM at a big company, I do believe, um, that the PM profession, like, itself is something that will be less and less valuable as time goes on in the way that it was
Hmm.
previously kind of thought of.
Hmm.
Um, and I think no one talks about this enough, but, like, when I was, 2012 going into, like, becoming a PM after studying engineering, classic path is you kinda have to admit, like, I wasn't the best engineer, so, like, it's like how do I get compensated like an engineer and still stay in tech, but then, like, don't have to code? And that was, like, the introduction to PM. And then that ends up being a lot of, like, busy work, really, when you think about it, around, like, you're not a
Right.
designer, you're not an engineer, so, like, I'm really hiring you to be a middleman between, like, figuring out what customers want, and then over time, that becomes l like, I just see more of these, other parts of the business and like designers and engineers actually now taking an interest in that and then developing those skill sets very
Wait, we
quickly.
lost you.
And have you ever like seen
Wait,
someone
we
who
lost the last thing you said.
oh, what was the last thing I said? The other I've seen other parts of the company um building that skill set very quickly. And I'm like, you want to see a
Yeah.
dangerous startup operator? Have you ever seen a engineer that took in a liking to design and user research and can
I
bang out a
love
prototype
those people
for a
so
deck?
much.
And I'm like, "Oh my god, you're gonna take over the entire world." Like,
They're
this is
yeah.
crazy, right? Like,
They're
and
they're the
and and
next
it's so good.
founders.
Yeah, and what I realized is like, oh, it's all about how good you are at the adjacent part of your business. So, like and
Yeah.
that's when I start seeing that people are dangerous, which is like, you take an engineer that has a liking to design, you take a design person who has a liking to engineering, you take a engineer who has a liking to user research. All those things, if you just do the adjacent thing really well, start learning those skill sets,
Right.
all of a sudden it becomes like a 10x multiplier for any startup. Like I'll take that person all day versus a user
For
researcher.
sure.
An
For
engineer who
sure.
loves talking to customers and they can quickly prototype something, at least in my world, is extremely valuable compared to a user researcher who does a research study once every 3 weeks. Like,
So
you
we
know,
we got we got a couple more minutes here. Um, Ro, you're obviously connected to the Silicon Valley scene, and you're friends with Travis. Do you have any like anecdotal stories that like people can like grasp onto that may not be in the Showtime series or something like that?
oh my god, okay. Well, from Uber or just broadly? I have a couple.
Broadly, whatever.
Okay, I think okay, you want to hear a crazy one,
Yes.
which is oh
Yes.
my god, well, I've never said this one. I think one of the crazy experiences at Pietra was, we were starting, and at some point, um, I found myself making a deck to pitch Kanye West, which is, like, crazy to
Oh
me.
god.
Yeah, and, the way that
Who? Kanye
unfolded
West?
yeah, who's the guy?
Mm,
Yeah, I guess Ye now. Um,
mm.
and he had, like, a jewelry line, and Pietra started as, like, supporting jewelry designers and building infrastructure. And, so I like, the way that went down was, like, I spent so much time on this deck. I get a first class ticket to go to LA for a lunch and then right back, and I'm in New York. So it's like, "Oh my god." And I was like, "There's something is happening here. This is, like, crazy." Um, And this is really funny how like my co-founder was there, um, and another investor who I love dearly named Anthony Schiller, who was like the person who set it all up, and and so I go there. We go to the table. I'm obviously 50 minutes early. Show up at the meeting spot. Um, the waitress people like sit us down, and so we're just waiting there like this. And my co-founder had Allbirds on, and I was like, Allbirds are easy knockoffs, like, take them off immediately." So he took off his shoes, stashed them outside the Beverly Hills Hotel in the garden, and then I made him put on my boots to be like, "Let's not piss this guy off. I don't know what's gonna happen here." And he's like, We're literally doing this?" I'm like, "Yes, these shoes are 2 sizes too big, but you gotta wear them for the meeting and, like, make sure." We're like, "Okay." Yeah, it's really, really funny. And then, and there's a punchline to this, but so he comes in, drives in with a red Lambo, doesn't even park in a parking spot, opens the suicide doors, gets out, looks at the table we're sitting at, and then points at another table, and they fashion another table in a different part of the restaurant because, I don't know, the sun was shining in that direction. So I'm like, "All right, Pan, like, don't trip because these shoes are too big. We gotta walk over to the thing."
Oh my
And,
god.
s and this is what young founders should know, like, this is a very interesting kinda learning for me, which is we sit down, he's on his phone, um, and I, like, start talking, but he's, like, ignoring me. Um, and then
Kanye.
yeah, yeah. They're like, "Oh, we have this company, we want you to, like, do this thing," and he's, like, on his phone. I'm like, "Is this what is going on here? This is like a Twilight, like, experience right now." Um, and then he looks up and goes, "What percentage of your company will I own if I do any of the stuff you're talking about?" And that was the first time I realized, like, "Oh, these people also think about business in, like, a different way." It's not a cool thing. It's like, and that was my first learning of, the classic Silicon Valley, I have a celebrity that wants to promote your brand, let me invest, you can have a meeting
Yeah,
with, and all these young
yeah.
founders, myself included, was like, "Whoa." And then you realize, like, these people are, you gotta think very deeply as a founder, like, will they actually help your company? They're very expensive. They also just don't care about your company a lot of the time.
Yeah,
So
oh
they're
my
like,
god. I feel like we should do a whole episode on celebrity
"Oh,
investors 'cause
Yes,
they are,
yes,
uh,
we
they can
should.
spin up founders and it can be a ton of work, and then you realize you're getting a really horrible deal for very, very little, and
well,
everyone will pitch you differently on, like,
oh my
all their
god."
value add, but it's shit.
Well, the funny part is, like, so that meeting happened and I flew right back to New York and I was like, "I don't know." Like, we kinda talked about nothing and, like, obviously, like, so outlandish in his, like, requests, which is fine. And then a week later, I get a message being like, "This person no longer uses electronics for the foreseeable future. So we'll, like, let you know what happens." And I was like, imagine being in business with someone who's like, they're not using electronics for the foreseeable future. Like, what does that mean?
Well, he's also,
Well, yeah.
got major issues, so that's a
Yeah, I mean,
particularly bad celebrity. You dodged a bullet there. Alright, we're out of time, we're out of
Yeah,
time.
no, no,
Any
we're not.
final words?
we're out of time, so we wanna wrap this episode up. Thank you so much, Ro, for joining us. And for everybody listening, please subscribe, or do whatever on your podcasting channel to
Kevin, this is, like, such good promo. Uh,
yeah.
Replace Kevin's getting fired. This is
Hey,
horrible.
hey, I have a business to run,
right,
literally.
right, exactly. This
Like,
is your
I have
lunch
a
hour.
business to run. I do this in 1 hour a week. Okay? So,
It was a solid hour, Kevin.
anyways,
It was solid. Thank you
anyways,
for having
thank
me.
you so
No.
much. Thank you so much, Ro, for coming on. This has been an awesome episode. Everybody go build brands with Ro, and we will all see you next time.
Bye. Thanks, guys.